Hello everyone, in today's video we'll be analyzing the mock 3 of the SBS series, that is the score booster series. We'll be analyzing the English section, so let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so the first passage is relatively an easier passage to understand. This passage starts by talking about how the author appreciates the bureaucrats. He says that they are one of the finest people ever. Then he quickly moves to say that the bureaucrats, although are really fine people, they are unable to handle the COVID-19 situation. They are unable to handle the public health department in India. He further goes on to give certain measures how to cope up with the situation and how the public health committee in India, the Public Health Commission in India can be improved. He doesn't blame the bureaucrats or the IAS etc. for the same. Instead, he blames the system and gives suggestions to change the same. So let's move on to the questions now. Alright, so the first question is, which of the following proverbs best reflects the reason author cites for the inability of the IAS officers to effectively manage public health crisis? A stitch in time saves 9, jack of all trades, master of none, early bird catches the worm, or a friend in need is a friend indeed. So the correct answer here would be jack of all trades and master of none. The correct reason for the same is given in this particular sentence. The author says that the bureaucrats, they move from department to department and they're not able to grasp a lot of information. So they have lots and lots of knowledge, but they're really not a master of a certain knowledge. So over here, this particular proverb would suit it the best. Let's move on to the next question now. Which of the following solution has not been suggested by the author? Create fresh entries rather than lateral in the Ministry of Public Health Department. B. Permanent Commission for Public Health. C. Bring back Indian medical services. Or D. Train new recruits to IAS into specialized cadres. Alright, so all the three, B, C and D, they're given in the second paragraph of the article. The first is formation of permanent commission, second bringing back the Indian medical services, and third to train them and give them specialized departments where they can rotate, max 2 or 3 departments where they can be rotated. Although, as we can see in the first line of the second paragraph, the author says that competent people should be brought from healthcare industry or other departments to the health department or ministry, and it's necessary. So here we can see that he's not asking to create fresh entries, rather he's entertaining the thought of creating lateral entries. So option A would be correct since it is not suggested by the author. Alright, so now let's move on to the next question. Which of the following will the author most agree with? First, identifying new and emerging talent, voices and thoughts, then sticking to the old guards will inject fresh energy into the national veins. Or second, many good officers in the IAS system may not be well equipped to handle public health problems, a prerogative of public health professionals. Alright, so the author would agree with both the statements here, both A and B. The reason is that identifying new talent, voices and thoughts are a figure of speech here. So the author is trying to say that the current practice of administration is not correct and that needs to be changed. These words are used figuratively by the author. And second, this is very well given in the entire second paragraph. The author says that the IAS officers are really great, they're doing a good job, they're really good officers, but they're unable to handle the public health problems, which is actually a perfect department for the health professionals. Alright, so C, both 1 and 2 would be the correct option. Now let's move on to the next question. Which of the following will best describe the tone of the question? How can you establish competency and creativity? Alright, so the correct answer here would be rhetorical. the author is asking a question for which he is not really expecting an answer from the audience. This question actually makes you ponder. It makes you think over the current situation. It makes you want to analyze the current situation. The author really does not expect the answer from this particular question. All right. Fifth, which of the following can be associated with the attitude of the author towards IAS officers as reflected in the passage? Empathy, pity, scorn, or awe? The correct answer would be empathy. The author feels really empathetic towards the IAS officers. He feels that they are really great. They're trying to do the best of their jobs, but they are unable to do so because they are being moved from department to department. And even though they want to do the best for their country, they're unable to do so, since they can really gain not so much information from a particular department, since they're moving from time to time. So this was the analysis of the first passage. Now let's move on to the second passage. All right. So the second passage is also relatively quite easy to understand. This passage talks about how after 16 years, a social democrat has been appointed as a chancellor. It further talks about how a coalition government is being formed with a total of 3 parties. And then the passage moves on to talk about what each party has gained and how they have how they've agreed to the demands of each other to form this coalition government. The passage ends on a note that Olaf Scholz will have to balance the competing agenda of all the 3 parties to ensure that this coalition government runs smoothly in the course of its entire governance. So now let's move on to the questions. Question number 6, which of the following is or are true on the basis of information in the passage? First, the new administration in Germany is a 3-party coalition. Second, the outgoing Angela Merkel government was a 2-party coalition between D-Link, conservative Christian Democrats. Or third, Social Democratic Party and conservative Christian Democrats were part of the outgoing coalition government headed by Angela Merkel. Both 1 and 3 are correct options in this particular case. Second is incorrect. The new administration is a 3-party government is clearly given in the first line itself, that 3 parties from opposite end agreed to form a coalition. Third is correct, since Miss Merkel was a part of CDU and Mr. Olaf Scholz was a leader of Social Democratic Party. He was the junior partner in Mrs. Merkel's coalition. So it clearly states that these 2 parties were part of the outgoing coalition government, whereas we can see that D-Link was not a part of it. So clearly the second statement is incorrect. Now let's move on to the next question. Which of the following is the main idea of the passage? A junior partner in the outgoing Angela Merkel government becomes the boss of the new government in Germany. B, although Scholz triumphed over Merkel, his success depends on how he balances the competing agenda of the 3 parties. C, German parties agreed to a coalition deal to make Olaf Scholz a chancellor, marking the end of Angela Merkel's 16 years as the country's leader. Or D, Olaf Scholz will head a 3 coalition with broad plans for Germany's transition to a green economy. Alright, the correct option here would be B. All the other options are either incomplete or incorrect. And we can see that Scholz triumphed over Merkel, but the last line clearly says that his success depends on the ability to balance the competing agenda of the 3 parties. So that's actually the entire idea of the passage, that Olaf Scholz has triumphed over the Merkel government that was initially there. And we later talk about how he needs to ensure success. So that's about it. The first one is incorrect because it's incomplete. It only talks about the junior partner becoming the boss of the government, boss of the new government. It doesn't talk about the future plans of the same. C is incorrect because first German parties agreed to coalition deal to make Olaf Scholz chancellor, and it says that it marks the end to Angela Merkel's 16 years as the country's leader, which might or might not be true. We are unsure, since that information is not available in the passage. It says that for the first time in 16 years, it would have a social democrat as a chancellor. So that's not really sure. We are not really sure if Angela Merkel was the chancellor for 16 years or not. And third, this is also incorrect since it's incomplete. The entire plan isn't to head just the green economy, but there are other development plans of the parties as well, which are clearly mentioned in the second paragraph, if you'll see. So now let's move on to the next question. Which of the following is an assumption behind the author's assertion? Although the coalition agreement clears the way for government formation, it does not mean that the road ahead would be smooth for Mr. Scholz, for the coalition is based on convenience and compromise rather than any ideological commonality. A, the coalition commonality is likely to fall apart. B, a government will be successful if its ideology matches with that of citizens. C, it is easy to manage a coalition government based on ideological commonality. Or D, it is not easy to form a coalition government without ideological commonality. So over here we can eliminate answer A because it talks about, it weakens the statement. So it clearly cannot be an assumption behind this particular statement because it is totally against what is said in the author's assertion. Alright, it clearly defies the idea of the entire passage. It says that the government might fall apart. B is incorrect because it talks about matching the ideology with that of citizens, and it doesn't talk about matching the ideology with the coalition government, with the three parties. So C is the correct one here, that it is easy to manage a coalition government based on ideological commonality, because it clearly strengthens this particular argument, and it is definitely the assertion behind this particular argument, as can be seen in the entire passage. D is again incorrect because it defies the whole idea. It says that it is not easy to form a coalition government without ideological commonality, although that is not the case. The three parties have formed a coalition government because even though they don't have the same ideology. So we can see that this is clearly incorrect. Okay, let's move on to the 9th question. Which of the following can be inferred from the passage above? A, in a coalition government, each party gains something while lose out on others. B, the idea of Olaf Scholz's party SPD is the same as that of the party D-Link. C, the Greens want the increased minimum wages from about 10 euros to 12 euros an hour. Or D, the FDP's demand on spending and climate agenda got the support from the Greens. Alright, the correct answer here would be option B. We can clearly infer it from these lines. On the other side, a relatively new leftist party, D-Link, ate into the SPD's traditional leftist space. So they have the same ideology. This can be inferred. Option A is incorrect because we cannot generalize a statement that is given for a particular government. It is a generalization which is given for this particular coalition government that is formed. C is incorrect because the Greens did not want the minimum wages to be increased. Instead, the SPD wanted the same, as we can see from this line in the paragraph, in the second paragraph. D is again incorrect because this wasn't FDP's demand. It was the demand of the Social Democrats or probably the grains. It is clear from these lines. So A, C and D are eliminated and B is the correct answer. 10th. Which of the following is an analogous argument reflecting the author's attitude towards the new government? We will work together if our differences are bigger than our purpose. If everyone is moving together, then success takes care of itself. C, coming together is a beginning and staying together is a progress. Or D, our ability to stay together is the linchpin in our long-term success. The correct answer would be D here. The author argues that the current administration is formed by negotiations and that success depends on Scholz's ability to balance the competing agenda of the parties. So, it is the linchpin in their long-term success. It means that it is the main idea, it is the glue that holds it together. It is the main thing that would hold them together for a long-term success. Alright, so let's move on to the next passage now, that is passage number 3. Alright, this is a great passage when it comes to legal perspective. So over here we can clearly see that the CM of Andhra Pradesh had accused the CGI of some serious charges, and the author further talks about how those charges were not true and how the CM is in contempt of court, etc. And the passage further talks about the confidentiality norm and if it should always hold the field. So that's the main idea of the entire passage. Now let's move on to the questions. Question number 11. The author mentions the fact that Mr. Reddy faces prosecution in corruption cases himself in order to A, support his argument that the apex court should make its findings public, B, accuse Mr. Reddy of involvement in propaganda against Justice Ramana, C, promote the idea that both the apex court and Mr. Reddy are wrong, or D, assert that the accusations and counter accusations are not new in Indian judicial system. So the answer is A, support his argument, because after these lines the author further says that the entire matter has become really ugly and that the court should have transparency in the entire matter, and they should bring back the findings of they should make the findings of the case public. So it is definitely to support his argument that the apex court should make its findings public. So B is untrue because again B is untrue because the author does not say that the charges against Justice Ramana are true. So this is entirely incorrect. To promote the idea that both the apex court and Mr. Reddy are wrong, again this is incorrect because it is nowhere mentioned in the passage. This is untrue. D is just a generalization of this case. It is just an assumption that we can make, but it is not really the idea behind this statement. It is not in support of this particular statement. It is just a generalization of this case, this particular case. Also D is out of context. It is out of context, so this is incorrect. Now let's move on to the next question. 12th, each of the following can be inferred on the basis of information provided in the passage except that first, leveling false allegations against judges in a case it's a case of contempt of court. Second, the Supreme Court should not keep proceedings private when allegations from the high office of state administration. Third, the use of privilege by the Supreme Court to not disclose its findings on judicial misconduct are not unprecedented. So only 2. First and 3 can be inferred from the passage itself, while 2 is just a generalization. It cannot be inferred from the passage. It is just a general assumption. So, leveling false allegations against judges as a case of contempt of court can be assumed from this particular line here. It says that Mr. Reddy is surely in contempt of court if the committee found no merit in the allegations that he raised in a signed affidavit. Okay. And first can be inferred from this particular line that the lack of transparency is based on a 2003 judgment of the Apex Court in which an inquiry under this procedure was kept for the information and satisfaction of the CJI and was not brought out in public domain. Alright, so it is not unprecedented. It has happened earlier as well. 13th, which of the following is the main point of the character? The Supreme Court must repeal the rule of confidentiality as it serves no good. The Supreme Court should make public its report that rejected Mr. Reddy's charge and gave Justice Ramana a clean chit. The questions on the character of Justice Ramana are unjustified as Mr. Reddy himself has stains of corruption. In the absence of report in the public domain, the verdict by the Supreme Court may find a little traction with the public. So the correct answer here would be option B. Because the argument by the author revolves around one thing and one thing only, that the Supreme Court should make its finding public. Because the reports rejected Mr. Reddy's charges, etc. and it gave Justice Ramana a clean chit. So this is actually the entire idea behind the passage, that the author should, the court should make its findings public and that the confidentiality norm should be striked down. So this is actually the entire idea of the passage. A is incorrect because it is just a generalization that the Supreme Court should repeal the rule of confidentiality as it serves no good. This is actually the main reason behind why the author says so. This is actually the entire idea of the passage. The author starts and ends the passage on this entire note that Mr. Reddy pressed charges on Justice Ramana and eventually those charges found no merit in the entire case. C is incorrect because the author is just using two pieces of information to infer this. So we cannot really agree to this point over here. D is again incorrect because it is what the author is arguing for. Let's move on to the next question, 14th. Which of the following is true as per the information contained in the passage? First, only matters related to judicial propriety of the Supreme Court judges are addressed through in-house inquiry by the Supreme Court Committee. Second, the Supreme Court is not under any obligation to disclose the findings of in-house inquiries. Third, N.V. Ramana is the Chief Justice of Andhra Pradesh High Court. Fourth, matters of judicial propriety of judges are addressed through an in-house inquiry by the Supreme Court Committee. So the correct answer here would be only 2 and 4. 2 can be inferred from the following line. 2 and 4 can be inferred from these following lines over here. I have highlighted these for your ease so that you can understand these. Now let's move on to the next question. Using your reasoning skills and the knowledge received on the matter by reading the passage, you are required to find that the author is not likely to agree with which of the following. A, not only should the justice be done, but also it must be seen to be done. B, the Supreme Court should not keep the proceedings of a high-profile case away from public domain. C, in the absence of the report in the public domain, the verdict by the Supreme Court may find little traction with the public. Or D, it is important to ensure that the public trust in the integrity of the apex institution remains strong. So the correct answer here would be option B, that the Supreme Court should not keep the proceedings of a high profile case away from public domain. The reason for the same is that the author would agree with option A. The author would not agree with option B because it is just a generalization. But the entire passage is based on these three ideas. This is the underlying statement of the entire passage. It is the underlying statement of the idea behind the passage. Author would agree with this because without any verdict by the Supreme Court, the general public will not have anything to base their judgments on. And A is actually the entire idea behind the passage. So B is the only thing that the author will not agree with. It is just a generalization. So now let's move on to the next passage. So this is a really interesting passage. It talks about how autistic people have really great abilities, how their mind works wonders because they have a really hyper systemizing minds, and the passage goes on to talk about how autistic people are really great for the society, how they have really hyper systemizing minds, and he or she further goes on to talk about how we should respect or how we should embrace autistic people, not just because of their amazing minds or if autistic people are innovators, etc., but also because they're humans. So that is the whole idea of the passage, that people should have a great approach towards autistic people. They should be sensitive towards their needs, etc. So let's just move on to the questions now. Given below are two statements that have been concluded on the basis of information provided in the passage. You are required to choose the correctly concluded statements. A. Do not resuscitate order needs prior permission of the patient placed under this order. Second, COVID infection rate among autistic population was higher as compared to that in elderly people in care homes. So we can only conclude statement 1, that is option A. We can conclude it from this particular line, especially this part which says without their consent. So we can conclude that this particular order needs prior permission of the patient. COVID infection rate among autistic population was higher, which is untrue because this passage says that evidence that death rate among them was up to 6 times higher if they contracted COVID infections. So the word if is here, and it talks about death rate, not the COVID infection rate. The option talks about COVID infection rates, while the passage, this line talks about the death rate. So this option is incorrect. Only first option A is correct. 17th, which of the following is true in context of the passage? Rate of death due to COVID-19 was not uniform among autistic people. B. Symptoms of autism become apparent in different ways in different individuals. C. At present, around 1 out of every 57 children in the world are diagnosed with autism. D. Despite physical limitations, autistic people have special ability to focus on details. So the correct answer would be B. Symptoms of autism become apparent in different ways in different individuals. We here are eliminating option A because uniformity of death rate is not discussed in the passage. Uniformity of death rate due to COVID in autistic people is not discussed in the entire passage, so this becomes irrelevant. Option B can be inferred from these lines that I've highlighted for your ease. At option C can be eliminated because it talks about 1 out of every 57 children in the world, while the passage talks about 1 in 57 children in England. The data available in the passage is just for England, while the option talks about the entire world. D is again incorrect because it talks about physical limitations. Although autistic people only have mental limitations, they do not have physical limitations. So that makes only option B correct. Let's move on to the next question. That is 18th. Which of the following weakens the findings of the research that more children in England are autistic than previously thought? The population of the autistic people in London has remained constant for the last 5 years. B. The research sample taken correctly represents the actual population of autistic children. Compared to last year, England's overall autistic population has risen this year. Or D. Increase in the number of autistic children is largely due to an improved recognition. The correct answer would be option D. The correct answer would be option D here, because it correctly weakens the statement. It says that we see an increase in the number of autistic children due to improved recognition. Over here, focus on this word improved recognition, so it correctly weakens the statement. Option A is incorrect because it talks about the population of London, not England as a whole. Over here we're talking about the population of England, so this is incorrect. B and C are incorrect because again they strengthen this particular idea. They strengthen the statement that more children in England are autistic than we previously thought. So only option D is the correct one here. It weakens the findings of this particular statement. Next statement, the author of the passage is most likely to be a social activist arguing for greater acceptance and support for autistic people. A social activist arguing for greater acceptance and support for autistic people. B. An autistic naval officer explaining complexity of underwater operations. C. An autistic person explaining how he transformed his disabilities into strengths. Or D. An author of a book explaining development of civilizations as a result of autism. It is clearly option A. I don't think I even need to explain it to you. It is very evident from the entire passage that it is written by a social activist who wants acceptance and support for autistic people, who wants people to have a more humane approach towards the autistic people. So let's move on to the next question. 20th, which of the following is the main idea of the passage? Autistic people are valuable to society despite their physical limitations and should be treated as such. Increased diagnosis of autism should be matched by increasing acceptance and support. C. Greater social acceptance of autistic people can result into increased welfare of the society. Or D. Autistic people using their abilities are capable of developing civilization and they should be accepted in society. So the correct answer would be B. Increased diagnosis of autism should be matched by increasing support and acceptance. So over here, option B is only correct because it captures the main idea and the main essence of the passage. Option A would be incorrect because it says that autistic people should be valued despite their physical disabilities. As discussed earlier, autistic people don't have physical disabilities, they have mental disability, they have mental limitations. So this option becomes incorrect again. Again, option C talks about autistic people being valuable to society, so it is against the idea of the entire passage, so it's incorrect. And option D is incorrect again because it talks about autistic people being the reason behind the civilization, the development of civilization, which is again incorrect. So the correct option would be answer B, option B. Now let's move on to the next passage. Alright, so this passage talks about the issuance of H-1B visa and how the Trump administration banned the issuance of this particular visa and what exactly President Joe has done right now for it. It also talks about how Indians are affected by this particular ban and how when this ban is allowed to lapse, how they would be profited from the same, etc. and how it would affect the economic growth of America, etc., etc. This entire passage is about the H-1B visa issuance. So let's move on to the questions now. 21st, the phrase the size of the pie is an example of simile, illustration, metaphor, or assonance. The correct answer would be metaphor. In simile, there is comparison as etc., which is not available here. As large as the size of the pie or as small as the size of pie is not over here. So it is not simile. It is incorrect. Alliteration and assonance have repetition, which is again not here. So even these are incorrect. It is clearly the use of metaphor. The figure of speech is clearly metaphor over here. Let's move on to the next question now. Which of the following can be inferred from the statement that there will be fewer jobs to reserve for Americans if the size of the pie is not increased? Through economic growth, momentum built on a diverse and skilled workforce. A. Increase the number of overall jobs in the market. Increasing the number of overall jobs in the market will decrease the opportunities for Americans. B. Decreasing the number of overall jobs in the market will decrease the opportunities for Americans. C. Decreasing the number of overall jobs will increase the opportunities for Americans. Or D. Increasing the number of overall jobs in the market will increase the opportunities for Americans. The correct answer here 22nd would be option D. We can infer option D from this given statement. Option B and C are incorrect because they talk about decreasing the number of jobs, which is against the entire idea of the statement. The statement talks about increasing the number of jobs, which is talked about here. A is incorrect because it says that increasing the jobs will decrease the opportunities. So again, that it is incorrect. Alright, let's move on to the next question now. 23rd, which of the following is or are true as per the passage? The United States issued 65,000 H-1B visas annually for people of other countries seeking employment in the country. Second, repealing the immigration rules imposed by Trump administration was an electoral promise made by Joe Biden. Third, the immigration rules imposed by the Trump administration adversely affected the India-US relationship. The correct answer here would be option C. Only 2 is correct as per the passage. So the correct option here would be answer C. That is only 2. We can infer these lines. We can infer this option from these lines. I've highlighted these for your ease. Option A is incorrect because it talks about the issuance of 65,000 H-1B visas but as per the passage, these are made available just to the private sector applicants. 65,000 H-1B visas are just for the private sector applicants. We do not know the exact number for the government sector employees. So again, this might or might not be true. We are unsure. And then third is again incorrect because it is a fear, not a fact. This is not a fact stated in the entire passage. The author says that he fears, it is a fear. So it is just an assumption. It's just an assertion. It's not a fact. It's not true. Let's move on to the next. Which of the following can be inferred from the passage? A. Indian nationals seeking employment in the US are the largest beneficiaries of H-1B visas of the US. B. The United States issues different types of visas for different purposes of intended travel to the country. C. By allowing the ban on H-1B visa issuance to expire, the Biden administration will be viewed as anti-Trump administration. Or D. Ban on student visas in the US was imposed due to ban on H-1B visas for foreign nationals seeking employment. in the US. The correct answer here would be option B, that all right. The reason is that we can infer, because we can see that the two types of visas that are mentioned, option A is again incorrect. Option C is incorrect because it talks of the opposite of what is mentioned in the passage. And option D is incorrect because it is out of scope. This is again incorrect. Only option B is correct, which can be clearly inferred from the passage, since these two types of visas are mentioned over here itself. 25th, which of the following is mentioned as reasons to halt issuance of visas by Trump administration? A, to reduce the US-India bilateral trade, thereby increasing opportunities for local companies in the US. B, to keep foreign workers out of country, enhancing employment opportunity for the locals. Or C, to discourage the CEOs of tech giants in the US from looking to India as a key source for skilled laborers. Or D, both A and B. The correct answer here would be option B, which can be inferred from the lines. It can be inferred from these lines that the stated aim was to help to prevent foreign workers from cornering jobs during economic distress associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. The main key was to increase the jobs for the locals. A and C are incorrect because nothing of this sort is given in the entire passage. It is incorrect. So I hope this was clear to you guys. Now let's move on to the next passage. Alright, so this passage talks about the latest amendments in the MTP Act and how they are beneficial for the women, and how they could have been made better. But then again, any changes in the field of women's health is more than welcome in India, since the current state is really bad. So let's move on with the passage. Let's move on with the questions. Question 26, what is the author primarily arguing? A, the MTP Act assigns the responsibility of taking decisions on abortions to a board of specialists formed for the same purpose. Although the amendments to the MTP Act are steps in the right direction, the law misses on the recognition of women's autonomy on abortions. C, in order to ease the laborious process a woman has to undergo in order to get an abortion, the state has made some positive changes in the MTP Act. Or D, by allowing the termination of pregnancy beyond 24 weeks, the scope of the Antediluvian MTP Act of the 1971 is expanded by the recent amendments. So the correct answer here would be option B. Alright, the entire passage says that I've even highlighted a few lines that would help you get to this point. It says that this particular amendment is a welcome step. It is a step in the right direction. It is really helpful. But despite that, it has a few shortcomings which are clearly mentioned here. That the women should have been made the center of the agency of the amended act. They should have been given the autonomy of on abortions. They should have been they're the whole and soul. They should have given the right to decide. A woman and her gynecologist should have been given the right to decide. So even though this act is clearly better than the previous one, the amendments made are clearly better than the previous one, it could have been better. A, C and D are incorrect because they are either incomplete or they are unrelated. Nothing of this sort is given in the entire passage. 27th, which of the following can be concluded from the passage? After amendment to the MTP Act, women can get pregnancy terminated by getting approval from one doctor instead of the previously required 2 doctors. B, before amendments to the MTP Act were made, women could not get the abortion done if the 2 consulting doctors disagreed. C, after the amendments to the MTP Act, the sex ratio will worsen. D, unmarried women were allowed to terminate pregnancy before the amendments to the MTP Act. So the correct answer here would be option B. Over here it says that after the recent amendment, women can get pregnancy terminated from the approval of one doctor. But over here the passage clearly mentions that only the opinion of one doctor is required, not the approval. Alright, C is incorrect because it is just an assumption, and it is actually not entirely true. It says that the state needs to keep a watchful eye that on anything that might allow the sex ratio to nosedive further. It is just a fear. It is not a fact. We cannot conclude it to be true. It says that it might hamper, the MTP Act might hamper the sex ratio, which is not true. D is incorrect because it says that unmarried women were allowed to terminate pregnancy, which is not true. Unmarried women can now terminate pregnancy after the amendment. So only B is correct, that before the amendments were made, women could not get the abortion done if the two consulting doctors agreed, because earlier the consent of the doctor was needed, but now the opinion of one doctor is needed. No consent is needed now. Let's move on to the next question, 28. Which of the following strengthens the author's argument? Before the amendments to this act, the doctor never denied a woman's request to abort a child when there was a threat to her life. B. Recognizing the primacy of women's agency on matters of reproduction entails the risk of sex ratio tumbling further. C. Giving women the agency of matters on reproduction can help save the state a lot of resources that can otherwise be employed for other development works. Or D. Due to the sophisticated technology used by doctors these days, women don't face adverse health effects if they get the abortion done until 20 weeks. So over here, the author's statement is that the amendment done in the MTP Act is for the good. It's for the greater good. So which of the following strengthens this idea? The correct answer would clearly be option D, that due to sophisticated technology used by doctors these days, women don't face adverse health effects. This strengthens the idea that the amendments done are in favor of the women. A is incorrect because it weakens the author's argument. A is incorrect because it weakens the author's argument. It says that it indirectly or directly says that the previous MTP Act was as good as the amended one. In fact, it puts it into good light. It says that the previous one was better than the amended act. B and C are again incorrect. B is incorrect. Okay, B is again incorrect because it is against women's right. It is against women's rights. It says that if women are given agency on matters of reproduction, the sex ratio might tumble. So it is against that. It's against the idea of the author. C is incorrect because it talks about freeing up the resources for the state. It doesn't talk about how the MTP amendments are good for the women. The dramatis personae, as mentioned in the passage, most probably refers to A. Person who makes decisions, B. Important characters, C. People empowered to take decisions, or D. Proponents of change in the MTP Act. The correct answer would be B here. Important characters. Dramatis personae in a drama refers to the center of the drama. It refers to the most important person. So I've even highlighted these lines for your ease. Over here, A would be incorrect because these the women and her gynecologists, even though they are really important characters, they are not the people who make decisions over here. They are not even empowered to take decisions, so even this is correct. There are not the proponents of change in the MTP Act. So again, this is incorrect. Only B would be the correct option. This is the literal meaning. A dramatis personae is the center of the drama. It is the person in the center of the drama. 30th, which of the following is an assumption behind the statement the amended act also allows the termination of pregnancy until 20 weeks based on the opinion of one qualified doctor? An improvement from the consensus between the two doctors clause that was previously required. A. Approval of at least one doctor is required while deciding to abort a child. B. Effects of consensus between the two doctors clause on women's health is not better than that of opinion of one qualified doctor. C. Recognition of the primacy of women agency on reproduction will discourage sex selective abortions. Or D. Any progress on the matter of abortions, whether big or small, is a welcome step. So over here the correct answer would be B. Option A is incorrect because it does not have any bearing on the author's argument. It doesn't have any bearing on the author's argument because it is related to the changes made in the MTP Act. So that's that. Option B is correct because it is based on these lines that the amended act also allows the termination of pregnancy until 20 weeks based on the opinion of one qualified doctor and improvement. So it is based on these and it strengthens the argument. It clearly is the assumption behind this particular statement. If the vice versa of this particular was true, then obviously no amendments would have been required. So this is clearly the correct one. C is incorrect because it goes against the argument. It goes against the entire argument. It discourages giving the autonomy of reproduction to the women. And D is again incorrect because it mentions an unrelated argument. It doesn't talk about the amendment, the reason behind the amendment, where the termination of pregnancy until 20 weeks is allowed now. So that's that. I hope everything was really clear to you. I tried explaining my best to you guys. I have explained all the questions with the answers and why a particular option would be the best fitted answer for that question, and I've clearly eliminated all the other options for you. I've tried giving you a short summary of all the passages so it would be easier for you to understand. Till then, thank you. See you next time. Bye bye. Take care and stay safe.